Hello, a very warm welcome to Middle East Matters. I'm Sanam Shantier. Coming up on this week's show, rebuilding one of the world's oldest cities, Aleppo, using German know-how. We're joined in the studio by author Shereen El Feki to delve into the gender and sexual politics underpinning the region. Plus, we head to the first refugee camp in the world to be powered entirely by solar energy, and that's in Jordan's desert. It was over 6 months ago that Aleppo was liberated from the grip of the Islamic State group. The city was the epicenter of Syria's conflict, pushing the civilian population to the brink. Today, with an eye to the future, efforts are underway to repair the war-damaged buildings and roads, with some taking inspiration from Germany's war-torn past. Shirley Sitbon has more.
Christoph Wessling lives 4,000 kilometers away from Aleppo, but he still knows the city quite well. His team of architecture experts has drawn exceptionally detailed maps showing Aleppo's old neighborhoods, mosques, churches, souks, wide streets, narrow alleys, and all the major monuments, the way they used to be before the war, still standing undamaged.
For instance, you can see here the historical Umayyad Mosque of Aleppo. We know through the media that its minarets have been destroyed, but apart from that, it's still mostly in a good state.
Syrian and foreign experts want to be inspired by the German experience. After World War II, Germany had to rebuild whole cities destroyed during the conflict. It took years to accomplish, but bombed cities like Dresden and Berlin have been rebuilt.
Our situation is very similar to Berlin in 1946 or in Tokyo in 1946. It's very similar. So you have a destroyed city, mainly destroyed, but we have a strong will to survive and a strong belief in the future.
According to some estimates, rebuilding the old city of Aleppo could take about 15 years. The whole city would only be back on its feet in several decades. About 60% of the city, once a tourism jewel and an economic and industrial hub, was damaged or destroyed by bombings and clashes. Residents started clearing the streets as soon as the last armed groups were pushed out, while authorities began restoring infrastructure. The goal is to rebuild everything while respecting the city's history. Not only the ancient neighborhoods, protected as part of UNESCO's World Heritage Sites, but also other treasures located across Aleppo. In the end, residents, authorities, and those helping from abroad want to make it as beautiful as ever and even better.
To Iraq now, where fighting rages on, with government forces launching an operation to liberate the last Islamic State pockets of resistance in the city of Mosul. Our team went to the front line with the Iraqi army, and here's an extract from their report.
The army has just seized this street. Whilst this soldier is recounting the fight, a rain of rockets falls down on the neighborhood. There's confusion among the soldiers who don't know where to turn.
Come back, Abu Shab, come back.
It's the helicopter. It's not a strike from one of ours, is it?
I didn't ask you anything.
The officer is uneasy. And when we ask him about what happened,
Tell them it's a hit from our helicopters.
Chief, it was not really far from us there.
Yes, I know. It was really close.
very close. These soldiers were very lucky.
Watch out, watch out, watch out.
A little further on, a whole group of Iraqi soldiers were struck by their own helicopters. Some have been killed, and many are wounded.
Now, what does it mean to be a man in the Middle East today? Well, to answer that, we're joined in the studio by award-winning author Shereen El Feki, who oversaw a study with NGO Promundo and UN Women in which 10,000 men and women in Morocco, Egypt, Lebanon and Palestinian Territories were asked that very question. Shereen, thank you for coming in to speak to us.
My pleasure.
Now, it took 2 years to conduct this very unprecedented study. What was the idea behind it?
We have a lot of research and programming and policies around women and girls in the Arab region. But it's one of the paradoxes that men are the pillars of our patriarchies, but we actually know very little about them. And of course, there are quite a lot of stereotypes, quite a lot of misconceptions about Arab men. We wanted to really explore the reality, men's lives at home and at work, as fathers and sons and brothers. And so this study represented, as you say, an unprecedented opportunity to see the real lives of the mainstream of men in these 4 countries.
You speak about patriarchy, and it's something that men seem to be struggling with in the region. And it seems to bring about immense stress. Can you tell us about that?
Well, certainly one of the more surprising findings of the survey was just how much stress these men are experiencing. 90% said they were afraid for their own security. Around 50% were either ashamed or depressed or stressed because they felt they couldn't provide their families with daily necessities. There is a lot of economic pressure on these men. They are defined first and foremost as breadwinners. But of course, we have double-digit unemployment rates in many of the countries. Times are tough. When they can't fulfill this role, they feel under stress, and they are suffering for it.
Now, in some of the countries in this somewhat macho region, there's high demand for paternity leave.
That was very interesting. So amidst all the findings of very conventional attitudes towards the place of women and men, we did find this really surprising interest in fatherhood. 70% of men in our survey had been to prenatal visits with their wives, and up to 80% in some countries said, yes, absolutely, we want paid paternity leave. Now, this is really important. This engaged fatherhood is absolutely critical, because what we also found is that men who were more likely to get their hands dirty in the house, looking after babies, cleaning, cooking, and all that, they were the ones who saw their fathers do this at home. Conversely, the men who were more likely to engage in domestic violence or sexual harassment on the streets, they themselves had seen similar experiences at home. So there is an intergenerational effect. It's really important that fathers are involved because it's the key to changing attitudes and practices more generally.
Beyond this concept, what was your most surprising finding?
There is this impression, to be quite honest, in some circles in the West that Arab men are violent, misogynists. What we found beyond all that were the stories of men who, for example, one Egyptian man who said, you know what, when I was young, I couldn't afford to be educated. When I got married, we had more money. I wanted my wife to study. I put her through university. I hope she gets a higher degree. We met a Palestinian man in this survey who said, you know what, when I got married, I didn't do anything around the house. And then I had 2 daughters, and I began to think, what if they married someone like me? So I started to get engaged, I helped my wife, and I realized how difficult the lives of women are. And so it was really interesting to see this opening. As I said, most men and a lot of women in the survey were also very conservative about gender roles and rights. But there is this minority which is changing. It's just that change, like everything else in the Arab region, is going to take a lot of time.
Now, briefly, Shereen, this is, of course, very much a taboo subject. Did you have any challenges in conducting the survey in the region?
Now, we worked with local research teams in each of the countries, and their surprise, and also for us as well, is just how open men were in talking about very intimate details. For example, 60% of men in Egypt said that they had sexually harassed a woman or girl, and women were also very forthcoming. So we were surprised by the degree of openness. There were certainly questions we couldn't address in detail, particularly those around sexuality, for instance, but those are also questions that are hard to deal with in household surveys. We look at them in other ways in in-depth interviews. So on the whole, it was a very positive experience, and we hope that this study is the foundation stone for other researchers to build upon this work.
What's next for the project?
Interesting you ask. We would like to do this, and we have plans to do this in further countries in the Arab region, starting in, we hope, some Gulf states, but also looking more broadly in Muslim-majority countries to look at the reality of men's lives in this part of the world. And in particular, I'm interested in looking at the intersection between religious interpretations and masculinity. We talk a lot about the impact of Islam on the lives of women and girls. We don't say so much about how it affects the lives of men and boys, and we look forward to exploring that issue moving forward.
I'm afraid that brings us to the end of the interview. Shereen El Feki, thank you for joining us. And with a refugee camp in Jordan, which has become the first in the world to be powered by renewable energy. The solar power serves some 20,000 Syrian refugees, and it comes with a whopping price tag of $9.7 million.
In this desert shelter, a Syrian family is watching television in comfort, thanks to this large fan. A few meters away, the street seller has cold drinks and ice creams at his stall. Refugees in the Azraq camp in Jordan have had access to abundant electricity for the past few days. On the 17th of May, a solar panel park was installed here.
It means the world to refugees that obviously are here in the camp that didn't have access to electricity in a dependable way. It means lighting for safety, for protection at night, for some cool in terms of a fan on a hot summer's day, or some heat in the winter during the cold months.
Several hundred solar panels provide electricity almost everywhere across the camp. Their energy capacity is 2,000 kilowatts, able to give enough power to over half the 35,000 refugees who live here.
Lots of things have changed. First of all, my children can study properly now they have light. It's been really hot, but now we have a fan. We've also got a refrigerator, so we have cold water and a place to keep our food. And we have a washing machine. Before, my wife was washing things by hand, but it was hard for her. Now it's a lot easier.
In 1 year, this solar park should save the camp close to $1.5 million and lower CO2 emissions by more than 2,000 tons. The operation is due to cost around $9 million, fully funded by the IKEA Foundation. The money came from a fundraiser in 2014 and 2015 that saw the company give €1 of every sale from a light bulb to the United Nations Refugee Agency. The initiative ended up bringing in more than $30 million.
Well, that's it for this edition of Middle East Matters. Don't forget you can follow us on social media. That's Twitter and Facebook. Do stay tuned to France 24.